Right.
Camera angle's not great over here. It would be nice to get a tripod.
Okay, hold on. Okay, David. So let's try making our first Zoom.
Yes.
So we're live right now.
Hello. So we have the stream going. Dana is in Versailles. I am in South Pasadena. Welcome to the Living Process weekly live stream. So Dana, you
Yes.
came up with a really great title for this. What was your title that you came up with?
Process talks.
Process Talks. When process talks, Demosthenes listens. No, that wasn't the title. But so what did you, now we've had successful live streams before. People, including Faiz, really loved listening to uh, what was that called? Reciprocal Space Part 2.
Oh my gosh. Wow, we've been wanting to do reciprocal space again for so long.
Yes, and I think for this, we'll be able to get in a good weekly rhythm of talking about interesting topics. Did you have something in mind for our first topic this week?
Um, Honestly, I just thought it could be super random, and instead of like having an idea of a topic, I just thought it always works so well when you and I just talk together and talk about random stuff and we just go for it.
I think so. Well, yeah, there's lots of interesting stuff happening, and you said you'd wanted to talk about reciprocal space again.
Yeah, I have wanted to talk about reciprocal space. Um, yeah, I guess there's just so many ways that we could talk about it because I still don't understand reciprocal space in its entirety. Like I think you would be a better person to explain reciprocal space. But when I look at diagrams of reciprocal space, like when I Google diagrams of it, it's so interesting the way that things flip and things change. And at least from what I understand, it's like almost like things interlocking and changing within a vacuum, but like not within a vacuum.
For everyone listening at home, what would be your one sentence definition of reciprocal space?
Yes, please give us your idea of reciprocal space in the comment section and like and subscribe, of course. So, um, reciprocal space, what I was thinking about reciprocal space is within architecture. I think last time we were talking about reciprocal space, we were talking about religion and how religions change and evolve. And for instance, like we used to be naked and then we became clothed and then we became very, very, very clothed. And now we're going back to naked again. And then now there's another moment in time where we're going back to being in full burqas. Like I'm not going to be in a
Okay.
burqa.
Well, that's reciprocation. That's kind of uh, reciprocation of modesty, you could call that. Now, reciprocal space, first of all, let's define reciprocation. Reciprocation means oscillating opposites, the reciprocal. There's a mathematical definition of the reciprocal where you kind of flip the number around, you take its opposite. I'm not all up on that, but I think that has something to do with negatives. It has to do with flipping something upside down. There's a reciprocating piston, which is a type of engine where they push and pull like that. Reciprocal space would be the idea where instead of conceptualizing space as in a kind of Cartesian way. This is why matchsticks are good. Can you even see that? So we're accustomed this kind of diagram.
Yeah.
This kind of diagram would seem really weird to a medieval person. Maybe not entirely.
To me, that looks like a XYZ
Yes, that's right.
in three-dimensional.
That is the type of thinking of space that was formalized by the philosophy of René Descartes.
Okay.
And it was prefigured by the optics of Al-Hasan, Al-Hazen, another way to say it. Although he did not invent one point perspective. He articulated some of the concepts about a vanishing point and the eye as a receiving vectors in one point.
Mm.
Brunelleschi was inspired by that. And he said, well, if that principle works for light coming into the eye, what about for the perceived lines of perspective as they go away from the viewer? And so Brunelleschi made, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Brunelleschi made his famous painting of the baptistry,
Mm-hmm.
and developed the principles of the vanishing point in one point perspective, which later got refined and developed mathematically. And sometime after he did that, this kind of conceptualizing three-dimensional space in terms of an absolute realm, a field of absolutes, not relative. This is not relative space at all. It's that you have a standpoint, you choose a standpoint, which is an absolute standpoint, and everything else comes out from that. Descartes articulated the mathematics that had to do with XYZ coordinates, XY coordinates mostly, but XYZ also. Newton thought that you had to have absolute space. He thought you had to pick something as a center. Later on, Einstein said, not only is it difficult and or impossible to do that, that's part of what they call the three-body problem. You can't get, if you have more than three bodies orbiting each other, the variables are so much and things are moving so much that you can't get meaningful sharpness to a certain degree. So maybe we have a different type of way of seeing space. By the way, if anyone wants to know how this figures into architectural history, there's a guy named Erwin Panofsky. Erwin Panofsky wrote about Brunelleschi and the Gothic, about how even though the Gothic architecture was before Brunelleschi, the Gothic architecture was before Descartes, before Newton, there was some sense that the Northern European mind, the Northern European soul, had a way of understanding space in this way, because you see how it works like that with the nave of the cathedral. It has a vanishing point. It has the lines coming in and out. It's not like a Greek church. A Greek church is on a cross. A Greek church has a big curved dome in the middle, which changes how these things are presented. So
that's an interesting point, because it's like when we think of coordinates and we think of like XYZ, that's thinking in the idea of a point in space.
Yes.
But if you're thinking of a form in space, like a three-dimensional form or even a line in space, you have not just, well, actually, no, in space, with a line, you would still have X, Y, and Z, but with a three-dimensional form, you would have not just X, Y, and Z, but like the rotation of that in the Z plane, the rotation of that in the Y plane, and so forth. So and also like diagonally or something, but it's like that.
So for everybody listening at home, think about how this applies to 3D modeling, to something like SketchUp, if you're familiar with that. What Dana's talking about is taking this XYZ conception and being able to spin it and turn it around, which we do in our software. Just like the Gothic cathedral prefigured the XYZ coordinate itself Our 3D software is pre-configuring something else, where you take that XYZ coordinate and place it inside of something.
Yes, yeah.
You place it
Or
inside of orbit space. You have to be able to place the XYZ inside of something to spin it around like we do. And
exactly.
this is very practical to 3D design, because you're not going to make 3D design tools that don't have the conceptual ability of something that you can't think about.
Yeah, like for instance, let's say you have a cube and then you set the point of rotation at one of the corners, and then you say you want to rotate it on the X plane and then the Y plane, and then kind of rotate it diagonally like that. So it's like and then if you move the point, it's going to move the center of rotation, and then you're going to have a different perspective. And then your drawing lines, your perspective lines, like if you know how to do perspective drawing, your lines are all going to move. Like your point of vanishing point is gonna
Yeah.
change, you know?
When the eye moves, or the camera, when the eye or the camera moves, so does the vanishing point move. This is one of the reasons that someone like David Hockney
Mm.
believes that when the Renaissance paintings that he thinks were done with a camera obscura, because if you're trying to paint someone's reflective armor, like those famous paintings of Charles V, Emperor Charles V, to get the reflections to be spatially coherent, you have to keep putting your eye in exactly the same place each time if you're looking at it with the naked eye. However, you are creating an image with a camera obscura by putting the
Mm.
eye of the camera obscura in a fixed place. And therefore, as long as Charles doesn't move and you paint over the light that is projected on the back wall of that camera obscura, you're going to get spatially coherent image.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's like the vanishing point is, no matter what, it's going to be, unless you move your orbit. If you're moving your orbit, then your vanishing point changes. But if you're
Correct.
staying consistent in your view, if you're staying consistent in your view, you're not looking around, you're not moving around, you stay consistent, but you move your object, just your object, the vanishing point is staying the same, but the lines in which it meets the vanishing point are all changing.
Right. And David Hockney himself thought that something like cubism and something like medieval panel painting, which has vanishing points but has multiple vanishing points,
Mm.
because he was such a Pomo guy, I guess, he thought that it was a really cool thing to do. And so he would create photo mosaics with Polaroids and line them up to give them kind of a medieval weird feeling. Van Eyck paintings are like this. They'll often have a multiple vanishing point.
Mm-hmm.
One of the reasons that the Van Eyck painting of Jesus looks so odd and his eyes seem to follow you around the room is that one eye is looking this way and one eye is looking this way.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Oh, kind of like, almost like a little bit like Picasso, how he would,
Yeah.
make one painting from like multiple different perspectives.
And I've thought about this. I think that what Cubism really was, just as the Gothic was the prefiguration of the Cartesian conceptualization of space, Cubism was a prefiguration of a multifaceted video, multi-cut video situation.
That's interesting. Yeah, like art and sculpture definitely took its exploration in that, and then architecture as well. And with architecture, art, and like all types of applied arts and even performed arts, they they felt as though they had seen it all, and they felt as though they had played with every library, every um type of design, every type of everything. And so then they, just like clothing, they went into just the box, into modern architecture. And this is where people have to understand how architecture and clothing really, really are joined at the hip. art, architecture, and clothing are very much joined, where if you have ultra modern design, don't be surprised if you're going to see people walking around nearly naked. Don't be surprised. If you are if the world is creating architecture that is very, very Rococo, don't be surprised if you see people walking around with big, giant, funky, wonky hairs and floofy floofies, you know? So we went to that point where we got into modern architecture where we took away, we wanted to reevaluate the square, reevaluate the
Yeah.
cube, and reevaluate our space back to kind of essentially the caveman way of living, where there's not much to see and there's not much to
Well,
wear in that case.
at least cavemen painted on walls. And cavemen
Well,
had clothing. Cavemen had
well,
clothing. Don't believe, as Russ and Kyle say, the whole butt flap hypothesis.
modern architecture does have painting on the walls, and it's called graffiti.
Ah, Adolf Loos would be so happy that you mentioned that. So now
Yes.
so I think you're correct. I think you're correct insofar as the architecture impacts the way people feel and the way people dress and the way people behave. I think that's generally correct, generally.
Yes.
You've been living, you performed an experiment because you left the United States, and you're living in Versailles right now.
Hmm.
What have you observed? Don't talk about what you necessarily, well, we could hear about what you think, but especially what do you observe between Paris and Versailles and the United States and Paris and Versailles
What I notice
with the
is
way
that
people dress and behave?
uh, with many different things. The way that people dress in Paris varies because there's modern architecture, there's classical architecture, but there's mostly Haussmann architecture. And so what you'll have is people dressing
Which for those who
mostly,
don't know, the Haussmann architecture means that's mid 19th century, vaguely neoclassical, 5 stories with a cornice.
yes, 5-story with cornice, and the upper levels have that mansard roofs and all that.
Correct.
So, um, what I've noticed is that in Los Angeles, for instance, there's not much classical architecture to see. There's not really much very historic. I mean, there's some historical architecture to see, but there's not really a lot of history in Los Angeles. There is, but there is not like you know, thousands of years of history kind of thing. Like we've destroyed all of that. If for good
Mhm.
or for bad, it's gone. So and also a lot of that stuff that was in Los Angeles was kind of like nomad type of architecture, right? With like, nomad like huts and all that.
Well,
Uh,
but maybe some people would say, in Tartarian Empire, before Great Mud Flood, there was great architecture in Los Angeles Basin. They all wash away.
yeah. Can you do that again?
No.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So yeah. Um, I forgot what I was talking. You're
You're
trying to
talking
voice.
about how Los Angeles doesn't have much of old architecture.
Yes, yes, that's right. And so what you're gonna have is a lot of people in Crocs and yoga pants. It's the way it is. And so then you say, well, we should be dressing really fancy. We should be dressing really nice. But again, like if you dress really nice in most places of Los Angeles, you feel a little out of place, just
And
like
then
you
how
would
do
feel out of.
people and then how do people in Calabasas live and dress?
Um, well, I would
And
say
what
that
and what are the fronts of their houses like?
well, it's a much different environment. That's more honestly, I would say that like the village, like the villages and near Versailles that are like more upscale, I would say more like Normandy type of thing. At least what I would understand is more like the Calabasas type of energy, where it's like more. urban sprawl, more like rolling hills, maybe. I don't know. I haven't been to Normandy, but from what I hear, it's more like that, like more fields, more like just grassy areas. And um, what I notice is that you don't really have much graffiti really at you do have a lot of graffiti in Paris, but not much.
Mhm.
And when you do have graffiti, it's 90% of the time like a very artistic and not just like, oh, we're gonna paint people, pictures of people that are like happy and smiling and hands and feet and all of that. It's not like that. Or like pictures of people, famous people. You don't see that. You'll see like, just something really artistic and somebody paid like lots of money to create a mural. And where in Los Angeles, it's very different. Like I said, it's kind of like cave paintings where you have people that are kind of marking their territory, or they're kind of like, so and so was here, put their hands, spray paint it. It
Right.
looks so cavey, you know? And so yeah, Los Angeles has more of that. Los Angeles does not have enough historical architecture to make people dress a certain way. Like I would say, especially in Versailles, you don't see any graffiti in Versailles. There's no graffiti in Versailles,
Which is wonderful.
100%. Yeah, it is wonderful. And there are public murals, but the public murals are not just paid by an artist who, the building owner was like, yeah, I have this vision, I'm gonna like paint this thing. It's not like that. The artist is paid by the city, and the city decides what type of art is acceptable for the city. And so the mural painters that paint in Versailles are specifically painting only classical paintings that align with Versailles paintings.
As opposed to what they've unfortunately done in Saint Denis. Have you ever gone to Saint Denis north of Paris?
No, I have not. Why? Oh,
I've been
yeah,
telling
you
you
said.
all, we really should go there, Dana. I should really go there with you. I've mentioned it to you before that Saint Denis is the first ever. This is where all the effigies of the kings of France have their memorials of all the
Mm,
kings of France. And if you were a king of France, you were supposed to be buried there. And it was the first ever Gothic cathedral. There were no
mhm.
Gothic cathedrals before Saint Denis was renovated
Wow.
by a guy named Abbot Suger. So Abbot Suger was an intellectual enemy of Bernard of Clairvaux. And this was during the time of the Knights Templar. This was during the time of the Crusades. I believe, I might be having this wrong, but I believe that the childhood friend of this abbot was King Louis the fill in the blank. I forget which Louis, maybe Louis the Sixth. But it was the Louis who was married to, I believe, Catherine of Aragon or Margaret. Yes, I think Catherine, whichever one was the mom of Richard of Lionheart. This French king was married to Richard Lionheart's mom. She was the one who was famous for riding a horse with her hair trailing behind her and holding two swords in the air.
Oh, yeah, you told me about that. It's pretty cool.
So this was a very, very, very interesting time in medieval Europe. Unfortunately, they did hire a professional artist in Saint Denis, and they're doing something that looks like do you know these things that when you sign up for YouTube and you have fat people with thick arms going,
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
that's
let's
it.
not let's not upset anybody, fat people. Like
Are
don't have we don't censor ourselves,
are you
definitely, but
are you fat shaming by saying the word fat is offensive? What if what if they've reclaimed the word fat?
yeah, what if that's like a part of the new tribe? Like
Yeah.
I think
Anyways, so
pH fat.
it's like he's trying to be like Keith Haring or something. And so they're paying some guy to put paintings like that outside of
Yeah.
Saint-Denis.
Well,
It looks like
because
graffiti.
yeah, well, think about this. Think about this is that when you have modern architecture around you, and Saint-Denis is probably has a lot of market, I would, I'm guessing you could tell me.
It's interesting. It's got brutalism. It's got
Yeah.
brutalism right across the courtyard, right across the basilica yard
Yes,
stands the rows of banlieues.
exactly. So brutalism and modern architecture invites poverty, just as living in a cave, you would assume, a caveman is a guy living in a tent is a poor guy. He's like the caveman. It's kind of like that, and that's why you see a lot of homeless people that are
Unless it's
drawn.
Abraham. Abraham had a fancy tent.
A, who?
Abraham had a fancy tent.
Abraham? Which Abraham?
The Abraham.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay, okay.
Yes. He
Well,
had an
it's different.
expensive tent. He had an expensive tent and it probably had lots of tassels and stuff.
Well, that's different. That's different.
Yes, yes, it is.
That's different. Um,
Never mind.
well, imagine that he's in a fancy tent, and then you have people in caves. So who would be the one that's obviously wealthy? So
Yeah.
again, the
Well,
one.
Lot was in a cave, and look what happened to him.
There you go.
He was supposed to go to the tent.
Yeah, yeah. He was supposed to go to the tent. Instead, he pitched a tent.
I think that's that. And on that note, yeah,
So, anyways, yeah. So I find it really, really interesting that well, not just interesting inherently, that of course brutalist architecture and art and all of that, it inspires poverty and kind of like a you know degradation. It's like,
it makes you feel like you can't do anything about where you live because you can't do anything about where you live. And it creates
yeah,
a kind of hopelessness. And then the one thing that you can do is can spray paint.
exactly. You can spray paint. You can say, "Hey, I was here." You kind of almost like, living in a place like that, you're spray painting not because you're really trying to create something, but because you want the world to know that you exist. You feel like you don't exist.
Because you feel so smushed down by all the uniformity. Yep. And
Yeah.
well, I remember this was maybe back in 2005 or 6, back when Paris had the banlieue riots back then. And they were interviewing a young man who said, well, what should we do about it? And he said, you need to give people some space. You can't just lock people up in filing cabinets like this and
Yeah.
expect them to put up with it and to not have it boil over. You need to give some people some you need to give people something that's theirs.
Hmm.
And that's what we
It's
try to do. That's what we try to do with livingprocess.net.
There you go.
Ding
And
ding.
it's interesting because they made a movie like that. I don't know if you saw the movie The Architect.
No,
It's a
wait,
really,
is that
really
the
good
Keanu?
movie.
No, that's the Lake House. It makes me think of Keanu Reeves.
No, no. It's a
Saying,
movie
this house
basically.
travels, this mailbox travels through time. Whoa.
It's a movie about an architect who very much has that like Le Corbusier type of urbanism, and he creates these towers for low income housing. And of course, when you create low income housing, you're creating low income, and then that low income housing turns into the middle class housing. And then
Right.
the
So it's
lower
what you're
class is the
saying
homeless.
effectively. What you're highlighting is that there's a race to the bottom that is reinforced by typology and by style.
Yeah, yeah, and that I have a philosophy really about like homeless housing and low income housing. That's a lot of people who do low income housing would really argue with me and argue that it's very mean and cruel to not be creating low income housing and housing for the homeless and housing for um that stuff is really necessary. But when you keep creating architecture like that, what you're basically doing is allowing the government to say, okay, well, looks like this is what you have, and this is looks like this is what you built. So this is what the next generation is going to live in. So here you go, take it. This is this
Right.
you're willing to live in it, you're willing to build it. So it's almost like you bake a cake and now you got to eat it.
They shouldn't be making long-lasting solutions to a recently intensified problem.
The way that I envision homeless housing, I know this is totally like off topic, but well, not really, but I envision this like epic idea of homeless housing where you would have these like very intricate like gothic architecture that would be there really, lasting kind of forever, but just really, really small spaces, small enough to really only fit a person sleeping on the floor and a few suitcases next to them, like basically the size of their tent. But there's a walls around you and a ceiling um and a local restroom, or creating another type of situation where you have homeless housing where instead of instead of everybody having their own individual rooms and shared rooms, it's like, okay, put everybody in one big giant warehouse, men's side and women's side. And everyone sleeps on the floor. You're gonna be sleeping on the floor if you're sleeping homeless outside. At least if you're inside, it's kind of more fun because if you're in a homeless housing and you're in some like bunk bed in this little room, sharing a room with like three other people, or maybe even just by yourself or whatever, it's really depressing. It's like really sucks. But imagine you're in a room, like you're a woman and you're in a room full of other women, and it's like, heck yeah, we're like a tribe. Like how fun, more fun than being in a bunk bed and like an awkward, like ugly design. It's like
Is it
you just
really, though? Is it
what?
really? I mean, it might be fun if the women did feel themselves aligned and in a tribe, or it could just be complete and utter chaos with people who don't like each other and don't particularly want to be there.
Well, then there you go. If they don't want to be there, then if they don't want to be there, then they can pay for their own place.
I
It
think the individualized, I think what you mentioned about the individualized dwellings is probably a better solution. And that is what the state of California is trying to do with these little tiny houses. That describes exactly what you've done.
Well, here, let me explain why I do not believe in individual spaces is because if okay, here's my reason for that.
You're
You it
living in an individual space.
No, I know I don't believe in that because the thing is that now your cost has gone up so much that it's going to cost way too much to house all the homeless. But if you can create a solution where all the homeless are in like a Wii Spa type of deal. They're in a Wii Spa where they have
Mhm.
a shared bathroom that has a little jacuzzi in it. You think about this. Think about this. Take away all those walls and bunk beds and everything and say, okay, yeah, everyone sleeps on the floor. Everyone sleeps on the floor, no walls, no anything. You're just in this thing. But there's a room over there with a bunch of women over there, and there's a room over there with a bunch of women over there. We got a little cafeteria right here, and we got jacuzzi room where you can go and take a bath. And and like a shower and a little bathtub. And imagine how, well, maybe not a bathtub because that could be unsanitary if people are homeless. But here's the thing. Here's why it could work for like a jacuzzi to have the homeless. Because then you'd say, oh, well, they're sleeping on the street. It's not sanitary for them to share a bathroom. Well, it's like, well, if you have a solution like this where you have a types like, you know, a homeless spa type deal, like a little like a wee spa type thing. If you have enough of those in every city, and then you enforce and say, I'm sorry, but nobody could sleep on the street. You're not allowed. You have to go into one of the places. You have to,
Yeah,
you can't sleep on the street. You have to go inside the place. What you're doing is you're preventing the spread of disease. You're
absolutely.
you're preventing disease, and you're preventing people from spreading disease amongst the homeless community. And so now people are much cleaner, and now there's less mental illness because now
Well,
if
one would
somebody
hope.
is, yes, and you know, you're much less likely to be sad if you have a lot of people around you. Really, you are. You're much less likely to be sad if there's a lot of people around you. Um and if you have your own individual spaces, it's not healthy for a homeless person to have their own individual space. That maybe they want that because they want to do something they shouldn't. Okay, but that's if if it helps to, if it cuts cost to put everybody in one room, or two, split it up and say two rooms. Okay, you don't like these people, go into the next room. You know, if it cuts cost to do that, and to have, instead of bunk beds, put in a like a better looking space. Why have all these walls and bunk beds if you can make the space look better without all of that? And then everybody feels happier. And then also uh having like, just like We Spa, I really love We Spa a lot. Having clothes that they give you, because you shouldn't be going from the street into the space. You should be changing your clothes and putting in some new clothes.
I think you're onto something there, Dana, is that if we were to revive the idea of a sanitarium, the idea of, they used to call these workhouses, but those were horrible things, or a shelter. You can call it a shelter. If you were to build shelters that were like a Wee Spa, I think that
Mm-hmm.
that could be very promising.
Yeah.
But we would have
Yeah.
to prioritize it. We would have to prioritize it to spend money on it, but we'll see. Because right now, what they're
Well,
spending money on, right now, what they're
yeah.
spending money on is the tiny little shacks all in a row with a bathroom somewhere down the way.
That's going to keep everybody impoverished. That's going to keep
Mhm.
everybody impoverished. And what's going to happen is that the middle class are going to end up in little shacks. It's not going,
Which they're
you
already
what
going,
you
which they're already going to voluntarily.
yes. And so
Voluntarily.
what you need to do is make a distinct you need to make a distinct separation between the homeless people and people who have homes. You can't try to blend the two by making poor homes.
Yep.
Because but you make it so that people with homes are they can go visit these places if they want. It's more, it would be more sanitary. It would be sanitary, or the people who live in these places can go find a home. And the thing is that, imagine you cut out so much cost. You would allow for Wi-Fi and three computers. Allow for Wi-Fi, three computers that you have to use whatever. Spend money on bunk beds and mattresses when, look at how people are so happy to go to We Spa and sleep on the floor
Mhm.
with a little mat, you
Yep.
know? And,
I think
and
that's promising.
yeah, imagine this. Imagine that there could be a room next to it. I know we went into reciprocal space, but I love how we're talking about something like this is great. I love that. So
Mhm.
imagine that you have a space like this type of homeless spa. Let's call it a spa. Let's get rid of the homeless housing ugly name and call it like, something more fun. It could be a spa. It's where you go, you shower, you clean yourself, and you sleep. You know, it's like a
Those would
Korean.
be nice ideas. So
Yeah.
now before we go, we should
Wait,
say
wait, wait.
that
I didn't finish. I didn't finish. I didn't finish. I was gonna
go
say,
ahead.
what if there was little rooms next to it where they give you tasks and like that you can if you're bored, you want to do a little bit of work, you go do some work. It's free work. You're not paid, but it's there and it's free. And if you do it, it goes on, or maybe it is paid. I would say maybe not paid, because you're trading for your place to live, and you're deciding on if you want to, contribute a little bit, and then if you contribute, they could help you with job placement. They can help you with finding a
Right.
job. They can help you with creating a resume. They can help you, but you have to put in work for them to go that extra mile.
And this isn't entirely new and novel. We actually used to do things like this in the 19th century. Nuns used to do this.
Yeah.
There's Mother Cabrini did something like this that was for both immigrants and homeless people, and she did that. I would pretty sure that was New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a TV show coming out about her, which kind of looks pretty awesome, either a TV show or a movie. So, anyway, so before we thank everyone for watching our stream, and thank you very much, we're going to be here every week. Every week, we're going to do a Sunday stream, correct, Dana?
Yes.
Okay. And before you go, Dana, there's that lovely fishy painting behind you with the koi. It's framed so well. Go ahead and talk about that for a while.
Oh, I'm actually painting this for one of my friends, and so he's like a friend. He's commissioning me to paint this painting for him. I'm still working on it. I need to finish it, but yeah, I it, it I've taken a little break on it. I need to get back to it, but yeah, basically it's a koi pond, and we did a whole design session together, making something really great. And I have a few other ones here, and I'm feeling confident about um, going
You
to
can show them to the
galleries.
galleries. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're gonna make a list of galleries for you to go because you are a Parisienne who is also an American, and
Yeah.
um, and people are really
And
gonna love your art. You just got to show it to people.
thank you. Let me show you actually one that I'm also still working.
Okay, keep in mind we can't hear you. So Dana's gonna be back. She doesn't have
This
a
one,
lavalier mic. Okay, there we
this
go.
this this one I started working on, and I'm still working on it, but I might just leave it as it is because it's so pretty. And it's a
Yes,
horse and a carriage.
and it's amazing foreshortening on that horse.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, he's a
That's not easy
sweetie.
to do.
Yeah, it was a little difficult, but he's got a lot of nice colors on there. I don't know if you
Is
can
that a
tell
royal? Is that
from
a
the
royal Lipizzaner?
Royal Lipizzan.
Yeah.
Oh, the type of horse?
Yes.
Well, see, this is why I need you, David. You're just so smart.
I know you like the royal Lipizzaners because those were owned by Princess Zisi.
Oh, that's amazing.
All right. Well, so I know I'm going to be talking with you very soon. You, myself, and Faiz are going to be continuing the Riverside LSRA project where we're building lots of houses for people. And so that's
Yes.
going to be happening, and other things besides, and an ADU that's getting permitted, and you're working with teammates in France right now, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm working with some teammates in France. There's a few projects that have small renovations, some interior design projects, and also I'm doing we're doing courses for Revit right now. We have a course that we're kind of, it's called Recreating the Classics, and we're taking Shabbat. I think that's how I say it. Is it Shabbat or Shabbat?
It
Anyway,
depends. I have no idea what you mean yet. I mean, Shabbat is the day, but what are you talking about?
he's the architect. He's a famous architect from Villa Lazarchus,
Oh,
and
so it's somebody's name.
yes,
His
and
name,
he's
I
we
don't know
have
what
the description. Go ahead.
is it pronounced Frankenstein?
It
I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It might be Shabbat.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it says his name is Shabbat. So anyway,
All right.
he's an old school architect, and he created the at
His
least
servant,
the so
his his servant is named Friday.
It's fun. Well, by the way, so as for the Shabbat project, I've been
Uh,
researching, I've been researching about it, and I can't seem to find out who the original architect is, or if Shabbat is the architect, or if he's just the one illustrating. Um, yeah, architect Pierre Shabbat. Pierre
oh, okay.
Shabbat, he did the Villa à las Arches. Okay, if anybody knows who the original architect was, if it's Pierre Shabbat or if it was somebody else, I've done some research. They say that they can't figure out who was the architect, but maybe it was
Oh,
Pierre Shabbat.
it
But
is
anyway,
le grand mystère.
it is le grand mystère. C'est exactement. And so basically, we're taking Villa à las Arches and we are recreating it in Revit in our courses. So if you're
Mhm.
interested in Revit and BIM, you can check out our courses. And also, if you're interested in Revit 3D models, we sell those. We sell many different types of Revit families. Take a look at our selection on our Linktree. It's Linktree/living process. And
You
also,
can
you
also,
can check out our website. Go ahead.
yeah, you can see everything that we're doing at livingprocess.net.
Yes.
All
Thank
right
you.
then, Dana. Well, this was really, really wonderful as always. So I will talk to you soon, and we'll talk to everybody next week.
Yeah, like and subscribe, everyone. Don't forget, like us and subscribe.